This morning, I was listening to a podcast and also reading this book, The Psychology of Money. And one of the podcast questions was around if you were on your deathbed, what type of regrets would you have about the way you lived your life? Now, whatever the age of the person would be, really doesn't matter. But let's say that you are in your 70s and you're on your deathbed. You know that you are at the end of life. What would you think would be regrets that you may have had regarding how you lived your life, knowing that your life was over? That's the question that I contemplated this morning. So today's conversation I want to have with you is when we determine how we're living our lives, are we living it knowing that we only have one life to live and that we do not want to have any regret about how we live that one life? I'm at the point in my life where I'm questioning and reflecting everything. I'm reflecting on the decisions that I make, how I make those decisions. I'm reflective on my intuition, what I believe is guiding me to be this, person that I'm becoming, because I haven't become that person yet. I'm 52. I'm still working on that person. So the question I want to ask myself and I want to ask you is, Chris, or listening audience person, if you're on your deathbed, what regrets would you have about the way you lived your life to this point? My answer would be not being authentic. And what do I mean by that is not having as much fun being who I am, right? I believe that a lot of us, no matter how we're raised with the beliefs of other people. We're raised to sometimes not question authority, not question those beliefs. It could be around religion, it could be around money, it could be relationships. Some of us have a lot of trauma that was caused because we were either trained into a certain behavior, we were treated a certain way as children, young adults, teenagers, whatever the category or the age would have been where you were either rejected, abused, whatever you would consider to be the trauma, right? A lot of us have trauma around money because I grew up in a home that didn't have enough money, right? Didn't have enough resources to make it to the end of every month. And the trauma that I experienced was always around deficit activities, right? You were told you couldn't do something because you couldn't afford it. I was told that we couldn't have something because we didn't have the money. And in certain instances, it wasn't things that were extravagant. It may have been shoes like some of my friends had, or some type of clothing, right? Or I saw where my mother and father struggled with paying necessities like food, grocery, light bill, different things that you would consider to be functional necessities. I saw my parents struggling with that, right? I'm not blaming or faulting how those things happened or why, but those are the things I experienced that made me have the wrong relationship with money, right? I started to seek as a young adult, really as a teenager, the hustle of making money, cutting grass, washing cars, doing anything, running errands that would make money. But I didn't really understand what the purpose of money was about, right? Went to college, took on debt to attain the degrees that even to this point, I don't even use some of the college degrees I have. I never used them anywhere in my career, right? So, but you take on the college debt because the belief system is ingrained in you to go to college, get a good job, all those things that, you know, in your family at the time they're telling you makes you more successful. So when I said I have regrets of not being authentic, it's because I have regrets of how either information, exposure, or access to other people I didn't receive or take in some of those nuggets along the way to live differently. So now, if I rewind back where I left superintendency 3 years ago, some of you know the story if you've listened to some of my other podcasts or my videos I've shared. I was a school educator, English teacher, went up through the ranks to become a school principal, central office administrator, ultimately a school superintendent. And with that experience, I learned to do what I needed to do to be successful, but it really wasn't what I wanted to do. I never really wanted to be a school superintendent. I attained the certification. I thought I wanted to be a superintendent, but the more I got closer to working in the central office, close to the superintendents, being the second in charge or a chief or what have you, the more I knew that the superintendent's position was very political. It was a position where you couldn't get as much done with what I had a passion about, which was the education of children in the classrooms. It was supporting the individuals in the classrooms, partnering with the principals, the other people that, were adjacent to the educational process, like the special education teachers or adjacent to the teachers in the classroom. I love that process. And the closer I worked with superintendents, the more I realized that a school superintendent really doesn't have a direct working relationship with those types of people in the school. Yes, they deal with the impact or the resources teachers need or principals need. That's different because they're functioning from a budgeting, this strategic planning, the political pieces, the communication pieces, the engagement pieces, all the things that make an organization as a chief executive officer or CEO, superintendent running the district. Those things look different than a academic officer that's working with principals on an academic plan. That's what I enjoy. So the closer I got to superintendency, it made me realize I really didn't want to be a superintendent, but I ended up being one. And I became a superintendent only because I knew that anything I put my hands to do, I could do it. I was trained that. That's one of those belief systems from my mother. She would always speak life into me around telling me that through what she believed was God, religion, this power, that anything I put my mind to do, God will empower me. He's giving me being that I was a Christian, he's given me this power to do. So I always had this belief that I could do anything I put my hands to do, right? Getting into some scriptures around my hands, that things will prosper, right? All of that. So with that being said, I listened to my mother's voice. I listened to other people, and I took these positions that I did things, but I really didn't want to do them. So 3 years ago, I decided I was going to stop. I left superintendency. I didn't leave superintendency because I wasn't excited about education. I left superintendency because the position of superintendent, again, as I said before, was very political, and it was organizational leadership, which is great, but it really wasn't boots on the ground in the classroom, in the schools, doing the things that I love, that organized teaching and learning and leadership for scholars and those people who work with the scholars. So that's why I decided I would work as an independent consultant to do that work more effectively without the political strings. So now if I'm on my deathbed today, I would say that I have less regrets of how I lived my life listening to other people and those belief systems that I have either that were in me, that I've dismantled, that I've deconstructed, that now I can do what I choose to do with the talent, skills, abilities, and experiences to make life more successful and more authentic for me, so that I don't have less regrets now 3 years removed from superintendency that I had if I were still in this position that I knew I was successful in, but I really didn't want to do. So if you're listening and you're in a position or you're in life, it could be relationship, it could be your relationship with money, and we'll talk about that in a minute, or it could be your relationship with the people on your job or even your boss, and you're in a spot where you're very uncomfortable, you're not authentic, you're not genuine in how you show up because you have to manufacture feelings. Like some of us, when we go to our jobs, you get up in the morning and you have to speak to yourself, be kind to those people, do what you're supposed to do today, serve your 8 hours and go home, right? Mind your business that pays you. All the things you say to yourself to just do the job, right? So with that being said, I now am speaking to people to say, live life well. And this episode is what are your deathbed regrets that you don't want to have? So if you're not reflective on where you currently are, where you want to go, what you want to be, and how your current situations will not get you there, you are going to have a lot of deathbed regrets. right? There's a lot of research, and when you speak to individuals that are at the end of life, or the research that talks about what people reflect on, a lot of them simply said they wish they had danced more. They wish they had taken more trips. They wish they had spent more time with their families. They wish they had slowed down to the point of not working as much, not trying to attain so many material possessions, thinking the big house, the cars. They wish they had not gotten in so much debt, right? All the things that we know, I'm in America, USA, that those things seem successful. To have a big car, a nice car, big house, money in the bank, all those things make you seem like you have status. But I know, and I've learned, that material wealth, or having items and possessions, will still not create happiness or joy, because they're temporary feelings around, yeah, I'm in a nice house, but I may be alone, or I'm in a nice car, but where am I driving it to, and what am I enjoying? Who am I enjoying the car with, right? Because you may be working so hard to get the car, you don't cultivate a relationship, or you're working so hard to keep the nice house, you don't have time to have a family, or to engage with individuals to enjoy the house more. Or even you have the big house and you don't have time to take trips or money for the trips, because you may be cash poor, right? Because you're house poor and you don't have enough cash to carry you through some of those vacations and excursions. Those are the types of things that people on their deathbed regret, right? That they didn't slow life down. So what I want to be able to get into now is pivot into this talk around the psychology of money. I started reading this book by Morgan Housel, and it talks about the psychology of money in the timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness, right? And what this author is really helping us understand is, how do you have a relationship with money that money isn't controlling, in terms of you're chasing it, but you understand the purpose of money. You let money do what it's supposed to do for you, and you have this sense of purpose behind what money does. And if you set where you don't need a lot or you want a lot, it's still the intention behind what the money is doing. So there's a psychology that I'm adopting now, that I want to minimize my life. I want to minimize the amount of debt and or debt service, monthly bills, fixed cost, whatever you call those things, that create where I don't have a great relationship with how my money works for me. Because I want to have more money that's working for me, meaning I can invest, and that money could, through compound interest, through other activities, be it something in the stock market that it has a growth, an index fund, or if something I'm investing in that may be tangible, like a property, and that property now is generating revenue every month, because it may be an income producing property like a commercial building or a residential building that's being rented, or home, what have you. So those are the things that I want my money to go out and do for me. So in order to do that, I have to minimize the cost. Money that I spend on daily living, right? Even watching the utility bill. So there are a couple steps we can take when we think about the psychology of money. That, how do I start to minimize my lifestyle in a way that I am enjoying, and I have more joy and happiness because of things I'm able to do and experience that I wouldn't otherwise have experienced, because I have all of this debt, or I'm chasing that American dream of a big house, a fancy car, nice clothing, which, I have on some nice clothing today, but they're not name brand, right? So a lot of times we equate name brand with nice versus just the quality of the material. You can get 100% cotton something that doesn't have to have a Gucci label on it. It could last just as long as that seemingly high quality Gucci item, but it's a non-name brand item that looks great, fits well, and it lasts a long time. That's a psychology, because if I spend $10 on this shirt that lasts a long time because it's a high quality shirt that didn't have a label on it, and I spend $200 on that Gucci shirt, I now have $190 at my disposal to do something else with. That's what I mean by making my money work for me, by decreasing my living, taking the utilities down, taking the fun activities that would be at the time, spending too much on food, going out too much, right? Those things, that buying extra coffee, right? Not that I don't enjoy coffee. I buy a cup, but I'm not going to buy a cup every day. right? Coffee is getting expensive. Expensive meaning the cost of coffee has really, I would say, doubled over the last 2 years, right? You could go get a $4 cup of coffee from Starbucks. Now that regular coffee is like $7, if my memory's right, right? But sometimes I scan and don't really look at the price, but I know that the cost of coffee is way higher. So one of the things we have to start to do with our psychology of money is determine where are you and where you want to go. So when you start thinking about money and the lessons that this book, and I haven't finished the book, I just started, and I'm only into the end of the first chapter, I believe. I read the introduction in the first chapter. So I'm learning more about my own psychology by reading this book. But some of the things I've learned just so far, and I underline this, is that my behavior is a soft skill that's very important to how I manage money, right? Meaning that if I have a behavior where I squander money, meaning I throw it out like I'm throwing $20 bills out the windows, I'm driving my car down the street, right? That could be me not monitoring how I use lights in my house, right? Knowing that if I'm in a room, I need the light. When I don't need, I exit the room. When I exit the room, cut the light off, right? Leaving the light on equates to a higher electricity usage, which makes my flexible utility costs go up. So I have to be conscious of that. So if I cut lights off around the house or I unplug things, I may see a 10, 5, 20% or whatever decrease in my utility bill the next month. What does that mean for me? Well, if I go from a $100 bill to an $80 bill, there's $20 more that I could use for making money for me. So those are simple things that we have to consider. And it's not being frugal to the point of depriving yourself. It's being mindful, intentional of how you want to make sure that you decrease some expenditures, still enjoy life, but you add more to the side of creating revenue generating activities, right? Where you now can put that money into an index fund, whatever those opportunities to create more money, you do that with it, even if it's in a simple interest bearing savings account, right? Or a online bank that may pay more for that savings account. You're automating, and I'm now going to put $20 more because I'm saving on my electricity bill. I don't think $20 won't go far. $20 compounded over time could do a lot. $20 every month times 12 times 5 years, you have a lot of money that you've already accumulated that you didn't even realize would be working for you while you're just every month putting $20 extra. So one of the sayings I say is don't despise the day of small beginnings. That's actually a biblical saying, scripture, right? Because how something begins will ultimately show how it's going to end, right? So if you begin with a mindset of saying, I'm going to decrease my expenditures to add more revenue to these asset creating activity, or these assets that create money for me, whatever they are, these investment opportunities. If I keep doing that on a small incremental, it will grow, and it just will grow. And you'll look back and you'll see after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you have accumulated way more than you had anticipated just because you made a $20 a month contribution into something, right? So part of not having those deathbed regrets is making decisions now, where I say all the time, you have to make those upfront investments that seem very uncomfortable. They seem challenging at times. It may look like a budget or making this list of expenditures that you're going to track and keep up with, and how you spend and allocate funding. But as you're doing that along the way, you're being intentional so that you can enjoy life more. You can dance more. You can visit with friends. You could eat out a little bit more because you're now experiencing where you decreased over time and been uncomfortable with some of the activities, but later on, it will pay you dividends. And I believe that as a function in my life now is that I will make the upfront investments so that I can get the return later on in life. And that's the message that I'm sharing today around one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the psychology of money so far is my behaviors of how I have a relationship with money will determine if I create those small steps to start to decrease my lifestyle in terms of what I can control, and adding more to the things I can control as well as in terms of building assets, right? So as we're deconstructing and being more reflective, we'll find ways to live life well, to live life more intentionally, to live life where you now are less likely to make bad decisions, or least likely to make bad decisions, right? What I mean by some of that is, I'll go back to what I said earlier, that if you're having these deathbed regrets, a lot of it is because of decisions we made, right? We either made what Steve Jobs declares as a decision one or decision two. I think that's the term he uses, where you can make a decision where if you make a decision, a door closes, you never can go back to it. Or you can make some kind of decision that it leaves an open door, right? I'll give you a decision like you can decide today to quit your job, right? That's a decision like level 2, because tomorrow you can find another job, right? But if you make a decision where you now terminate something and that door is closed and it's a life altering decision, you can never go back to it. Those are the kind of decisions that take more time and contemplation. But some level 2 decisions are easy to make, right? When it comes to my intuition and what the universe is speaking to me, I can make a decision very quickly because my intuition is telling me that let's go for it, do it, right? Some of those other decisions I have to now contemplate and have more analysis, have more consultation, more partnership with people around, and making sure that I'm taking a risk that I know that maybe, what I consider I'm 51% sure that it's going to work, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, right? Because it took a little bit more contemplation on my behalf, or some consideration or partnership and understanding and working with other people, right? So with that being said, I think about the psychology of money today. As I'm closing out this episode, I want you to remember a couple things, is that be reflective around your deathbed experience, right? No, I'm not saying that death is coming right now for any of us, because it's ultimately going to happen to all of us. But what are you doing now that's impacting your life in a way that if you were to pass away or be on your deathbed tomorrow, you would regret that you're doing this today, because it didn't give you joy, it didn't give you peace, it didn't give you that sense of fulfillment, and it wasn't something that was intentionally around you being authentic. And that's a real reflection that we need to have, so that we're showing up more authentically for people, that the loved ones that are connected to us, they get the best version of us, right? They get the best attitude that we have, because we're living and becoming our best selves, right? Our higher selves. And without this reflection, I don't believe that you can get to the next level of being a being or an individual that's successful in whatever you consider to be successful, that you're now more, you have more freedom, more opportunities, you're more liberated. You're out of a circle, meaning that the job was limiting you, or the relationship was limiting to you, so you step out of the circle. There's an analogy, and actually it's research around, if you take an ant and you put it on a white piece of paper and you put a circle around it with an ink pen, the ant won't go outside of that circle, because you've really in its mind created a barrier. Although maybe if you think about an ant is minuscule on a sheet of paper, but whatever that ink you put on that paper, it created like a little border. But the next time that ant ever steps over that ink drawn line, you never could put it back in a circle again. So a lot of us are in these artificially created circles, and we just run around in that circle. Some of the circles are small, some of the circles are large, but you never have stepped across to know that you're really not in that circle, right? Because your mind kept you there. Relationship, it was easy. It was maybe it was traumatic, and you don't want to cross over the work to get beyond that, but you're in this artificial barrier in your life. So it's time to step over that artificial line and take those risks, meaning communicate more, say what you want more, work towards your plan, start that business, break that relationship off, quit that job, apply for that new job, go back to school, get a certification. Whatever it is, start walking more, eating more, cooking more, whatever those things are, eating healthy, whatever those things are that you think were artificial and barriers that you can achieve, just start stepping over the line. And I guarantee you will have more success in your life, and you will feel more authentic, and you will feel more successful, even if it's not comparing yourself, because comparison will kill you. It's not comparing yourself to other people. It's what you want, right? I'm living a life that's well for Christopher. It's not about anyone else, right? That's that thinking I dismantled, because if I tried to please my mother, who, rest her soul, she's dead and gone, but I still, I'm tethered to sometimes what your mother, even though my mother's passed, I'm still tethered to the things I believe my mother wanted for me. I have to dismantle that because some of my mother's wants for me weren't things I wanted. Right? Nothing about my mother, and it doesn't lessen the fact that she loved me. It's the fact that people will put what they want on you, but it's not what you want for yourself, and it will not create happiness. So I want everyone to achieve this ultimate, whatever joy, peace, fulfillment, love that you want by being reflective and making it happen for you, right? Some of that looks selfish to other people. Don't worry about that, but make it successful for you. So that's the B spot. Live life well.